As promised, video number 3 for Frankenskirting. This is a lot of work sometimes, but as you practice, you'll get better and better at it. A couple of things with this particular skirt are a little different, so I'll show you some tips when you run into this part of the process. So we have deconstructed. We've gotten our 2 layers and the first seam of our belt added, and now we're going to do the final seam, the final sew of the belt. So when you sew, there's a couple things that you want to pay attention to. So I've pinned it a couple times just so I can kind of show you what we're going for. We want to fold the belt over. That longer hem is going to go underneath, and we're going to have a nice flat belt. One trick with this, when you're pinning this layer on, so you can see this is our 3 layers. This is the last seam we sewed. I'm going to fold this over. When you're pinning this, instead of pinning up and down, you're going to pin across the seam. And a trick to see, because when you deconstruct, you're going to notice that a lot of times that this seam doesn't always catch the back of the skirt. Like you'll have some stitching down here on the layer. And that it happens. Almost every skirt has a little bit of seam that's not catching all of the belt, but you do want to catch it on the sides, and you do want to make sure you're catching it on certain parts of the skirt. And for most of it, like it's totally fine if there's an inch or two that doesn't, but you don't want to have like 6 inches of skirt where you're not catching the seam, because then the belt's not going to lay flat when you're wearing the skirt. So if you pin it right close to the edge of the hem here, that's what you want to do. And again, do your pins sideways. Make sure that your layers are flat, and you'll do this all the way across the skirt. But what I want to show you, I did this pin really close down and this pin a little higher. When I flip this layer, my pin did not get the belt. So this seam would go just on the layer and not catch the belt, which again, that's what we want to avoid. On this pin, I got the belt, not the layer. Hopefully you can see it's kind of the same color of the fabric there, but this is the pin. That's where my seam would go if I followed my pin line. I could put my pin a little bit between the two, but I just wanted to show you guys that trick. And then again, you're gonna just fold and pin all the way across the skirt. Now, a couple of things when you get to buttonholes. There should be a U in your fabric here. So you're gonna put either side of the U over on either side of the buttonhole so that it lays flat. And then you just do the same thing. You would put a pin in here. Now this also, there's a hole here or a rip. So the U was cut and then it ripped a little further. Or maybe when I was de-stitching, I got a little aggressive. Sometimes I poke holes in the fabric. If that happens, it's okay. We're working on it, right? We've already got a seam here trying to hold this together, but I want to make sure my belt is covering that and that my seam catches it. So I don't want my seam to come way up here because the hole's down here. When I'm feeding this through the machine, I'm gonna get as close to the edge of the belt here as possible because this hole is really close to the edge. Like it barely covers it. I might miss it. I might miss the bottom layer in the back if I do that, but you can get just a couple of stitches longer, and then you can kind of move it back up so that it's catching all of the belt layer. That's just going to help with preventing the fabric from fraying or ripping further. The other tip around buttonholes is that sometimes you have a layer that the layer that it was attached to previously, the belt that it was attached to previously, maybe only had 1 or 2 buttonholes, so there's no U there. Well, I can't really fold this fabric and have it lay flat if there's not a U there. Like it's gonna bunch up under that seam. So we don't want that. We want to get the buttonhole, and we're gonna come and just cut a slit, but don't cut through your seam that's already there. So I'm gonna use my little snippers, a little right-handed here, make sure I'm lined up with the buttonhole. Just a little V, I don't wanna cut through my seam. So carefully watching that. And then I'm going to lay that underneath on either side of where the seam of the buttonhole is. And then I can sew past that. So then you would, again, you'd put a pin here. I'll put my pins way over here out of reach, which was good because I didn't want to poke my fabric. So then you would just pin it here like shown previously, so that when you're sewing through the skirt, it's all laid flat for you. Oh, I didn't actually poke it through the fabric at all. There we go. And then you can see that your hem would be there. All right, then you take it to your machine and you put it through your machine. A few tips is that when you're feeding the machine, you want the bulk of your fabric out of the machine. You don't want to push your fabric through that little hole between the needle and the edge of the machine. So you can start on either end of the skirt, it doesn't matter. So just make sure that the skirt isn't gonna get stuffed up in the machine. And check yourself occasionally as you're feeding it through that you didn't get a bunch in the fabric and that you're catching fabric in there. Silk is slippery. Take your time and have fun with it. That's it. That's our final video for Frankenskirting. I hope it went well. I hope you guys are able to figure it out. Let me know if you have questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll ask my mother-in-law and she'll help us come up with the right answer. So thank you so much. That's a wrap. Good luck with your sewing.